Well, good evening, everybody. We'd like to welcome you tonight to our February the 6th, 2018 Hendersonville Regional Planning Commission meeting. And would like to note that everyone is present with the exception of Mr. Millsaps, and I'm understanding, and Dr. Lee is on his way. We'd like to welcome Vanessa Silkwood to our Planning Commission. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you a part of our commissioning team, and also would like to take the opportunity and thank Mark Bristol for his years of service to our Hendersonville Regional Planning Commission. And with that said, we've got a quorum, so we're going to continue on. There are no public hearings. We have. Does anybody have any requests for information and assistance? Hearing none. Additions to the agenda, are there any? Hearing none. We have the minutes of January 2nd. Do I have a motion to accept? We do accept by Mr. Altizer, second by Ms. Stringfellow. Any discussion?
Abstain.
Okay, you want to abstain? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None. And we have two abstentions, Ms. Atchley and Ms. Silkwood. Okay, and then we have the consent agenda items. We have there's none, and then we have the final plats. And the first one is Lakeview Acres, resub lots 10A and 10B, final plat. If you'll turn to that. Mr. Free, who's got this one?
That'll be Grant Green, our senior planner.
Mr. Green, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Normally, this would be a small re-subdivision that would only be like a staff approval, but given that the situation with this is you've got a non-conforming road frontage, it would require a deviation from the subdivision regulations. Basically, and the reasoning for this is they have submitted that the 2009 plat that this was last recorded, these lots showed that it had an incorrect road frontage, and one deed was recorded, one deed remained the same, and it's kind of a confusing situation. But going back and looking at the old plat, it didn't show a garage and some other things that were incorrect. So what they want to do is essentially just revert back to what the original deeds stated and return the property line to the previous place. And that was where the deviation request would come into play, as since they would need less than 50 foot of road frontage either way, it would require a deviation from the subdivision regulations.
Okay, so do we need to grant that deviation? Let's see if they agree with all staff comments. So what's?
Yes, sir. And staff looked at the deeds and went back and did some research, and that what they're saying is correct. So we have no issue with that deviation.
Okay, thank you very much. Having said that, is there any questions from the commission at all on this one? Okay, since everybody's in agreement, I move to approve. Ms. Ashley makes the motion. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Altizer. I had to get that in my brain. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so ordered. We'll move on now to Savannah, Phase 7, final plat. Mr. Free, who's got that one?
This also will be Mr. Green.
Okay, Mr. Green, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. This plat just amends an easement to change it to open space to ensure accessibility for a pump station for its White House Utility District. And it's in Savannah, Phase 7. Essentially, I think the surveyor has agreed to address the comments. Everything seems to meet the requirements, and things should be good to go on this one.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. Are there any questions by any of the commissioners? Move to approve by Ms. Atchley. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Lee. Any questions? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are any opposed? So ordered. There are no preliminary and final development plans, no site plans, no sketch plats. We have one preliminary plat, which is the Gregg Soe property, location east side of Saundersville Road, south of Lower Station Camp. And Mr. Mr. Free, is Grant going to handle that one? too?
Grant's going to handle that one.
Okay,
This is
Grant,
your role
go ahead.
tonight.
Okay, this is a 7-lot subdivision that is been requested by Southeastern Building Corporation. It's located on Saundersville Road. It is in the urban growth boundary, but also in the planning region. And due to it being in the planning region, we do have extraterritorial zoning that would apply to that, which by TCA statute, we enforce our subdivision regulations and our zoning there. What we've looked at on this is we've had some issues on this one. Our staff met with the developer back in November. There is still a number of outstanding issues. There's a January 2nd submittal, January 11th staff comments, and then it came back for the resubmittal on January 18th. With the developer comments. We did send an email on January 25th addressing those, and we offered to meet with the developer. City engineer and I met with them, and we talked to them about addressing those staff comments, which the official staff comments went out February 1st. So we did not receive anything else addressing those at that point. So essentially what we were looking at is there's a number of items that have not been addressed at this point. And I guess essentially what I want to do is run down through here and in our conversation with the developer on for number 1 on the name, that was not an issue to change that, but we haven't got the official comments back. So I don't think they have an issue with number 1. Number 2 is a request, actually it's the side yards are required to be 20 feet in ER zoning. So the side yards that are requested are 10 feet on each of these lots. So we've told them on our staff comments that this needs to be addressed by, the only way to address it would be to variance from the RBCA. However, it is kind of a self-imposed, like a self-created variance, so that would be, I think, a tougher thing to be able to justify. But
Mr. Green, would you explain that a little bit about the self-imposed part?
well, there's really no substantial hardship that's part of this. That would be part of the variance request that we can see on the face of this. So. And there hasn't been an application as of yet to really detail that, but it's essentially just to create a larger area for a side load garage, which I think would be a good thing. We definitely have no issue with having enough space for that, but in order to do that, it might be better to do a 6-lot subdivision and create more space by doing it that way, rather as opposed to the variance request. But we did say that that would need to be filed and approved, which that can likely be done down the road. But currently, to get the plat approved, what we probably want to see are the correct setbacks, and then come back with the variance request afterward, if approved.
Which is consistent with the current subdivision regulations. Am I correct?
Well, yeah, the zoning ordinance would be yes. In order to get it approved, we want to make sure it meets the side yards that
Yes,
are
sir.
required in the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
And let's see, there's a 14-foot minimum drive that was requested in order to minimize the access points on Saundersville Road, and I think the city engineer may go into that further. As well as right-of-way dedication that's required along Saundersville Road. And some other issues that we looked at on this were essentially being in the planning region does not make them exempt from, any developer exempt from requirements by either the city or the county. So being in the planning region, if it were just in the UGB and outside of the planning region, it would follow the county and their subdivision regulations. But being in the planning region, we do exercise authority over that. So what we would be looking at is our requirements. But if it weren't our requirements, it would be the county's requirements if it were, otherwise. But what we've looked at on that is, in terms of, let me back up. Our subdivision regulations require, sidewalks, curb cuts, and some issue, things like that. And I think Marshall may discuss that a little bit further, but the fee in lieu may be the option that we would request for that as. And then there's some other notational items, just a lighter shade on the topo to make it clear. And then the public utility and drainage easement at the rear, kind of difficult to determine the boundaries, just that needs to be addressed. So, if those items can be addressed, I think it's something that could work. But, there's a lot of things that make it more difficult than just saying, can you address the comments?
Okay, Mr. Green, thank you. Let's go ahead and hear from Mr. Boyd, and then I see Mr. Lucky is here, and then we'll go ahead and hear from the developer and see what we can do. Go ahead.
The 14-foot driveway Grant mentioned, there's a section in the subregs that allude to limiting access points on a collector road, and as it's proposed, there'd be 7 driveways, and my comment was to try to limit that either through the use of just a private access road, or we also discussed doing shared driveways, which would also limit access, which I think I would be okay with either option. The right-of-way dedication and the payment in lieu was based on the major thoroughfare plan. It outlines the improvements needed for that section of road. And of course, it's 4 12-foot lanes, 16-foot median, curb and gutter, sidewalk. Anyway, the payment in lieu that I calculated was based on the major thoroughfare plan, which is of course more than the typical sidewalk and curb and gutter that we normally require. Of course, the right of way, I'll leave anything out. Okay, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Boyd. I can see Mr. Lucky at the podium. Good to see you tonight. Why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I'll go ahead and summarize some of this. We agree on planning comments 1, 6, and 8, and Public Works comment number 2.
Okay, let's go slow. You agree on 1,
6,
6, and 8.
and 8 on planning.
And then Public Works comments, which one?
Number 2, we agree to it.
Okay, if I understand, the developer agrees on planning comments 1, 6, and 8, and Public Works comments 2.
And I'll try and speak up. I'm sorry about that. With clarification on number 2 of planning, when we met with Grant and Marshall, I thought we were clear that we would just submit to the BZA after our plat was approved, and we'd put the standard setbacks on the plat. The reason that y'all should approve it here is because the way we have it proposed makes it easier to put side load garages on, and it takes a step out of the process. They'll approve it because they'll want to see side load garages too. It's not a hardship, it's just common sense. If y'all want to approve it with the modified setbacks, that's at your discretion. If you don't, we'll just go to the BZA and get it done. So that's a point y'all can consider. The next point, which is number 3 of the planning comments, which Marshall and Grant spoke of, was the 14-foot access point. In the subregs 3-102.602, subsection C, it allows for approaching this roadway and attaching to this roadway that the driveways be 100 feet apart. Our lots are on average 104 feet wide. In our estimation, we meet that requirement. Each lot should have its own exit point. If you wanted to look at it from a pure traffic standpoint, it's it's immeasurable. It's 56 trips out of 7 lots a day versus the 15,000 car trips that could be calculated after the future development of all the lots. So it's a percentage of a percentage of a percentage. So we're requesting just to have normal driveways go out to the road and tie in. The right-of-way dedication at Saundersville Road, we don't have an issue with giving the dedicated right-of-way. The city wants 25 additional feet, so a full 45 feet from center line. If the city builds a road that takes 90-foot right-of-way, pretty much every entrance monument that's on Saundersville Road is going to have to come down. So I'm not really sure that that's actually a reality, but at that particular point, that seemed excessive to us, but we're willing to do the additional 25 feet. We think it's unnecessary, but we're willing to do it. Yes, sir.
So you're agreeing with number 4?
We're agreeing with number 4. I was bringing it up as a discussion point, and it's number 4 in planning and number 4 in public works.
Right.
We're a no on number 3 in planning and number 5 in public works. We're just grouping them. They're the same. The rest of the comments can really be summed up into one category, which is we had an original pre-app meeting that Grant referenced on November 14th. In this meeting, we discussed whether the subdivision was going to be subject to the subdivision regs and the city stormwater. Our understanding walking away from that meeting is that it wasn't. Keith Free, Marshall, and Grant were all in that meeting. I said it multiple times in the meeting. We asked the question. All of our notes say that. We followed up with 3 other emails. One on November 15th to confirm, see if there was any changes. November 22nd, November 29th to Sarah in the engineering department. We finally received an email back from Sarah on December 5th noting that she really had no clarification other than that if we wanted to budget, we might want to budget for the pay in lieu of fee. Now, at this point, we're 3 or 4 weeks into the project, and we've already surveyed it, engineered it, have the earnest money up, and we're doing our design work. They send us the initial comments on 111. We respond to the initial comments based upon what they told us in the November 14th meeting. And our comments right down the line say that we disagree, the city has no legal authority to require. That was all based on what they told us in the meeting. I didn't make up or dream up the fact that I kept responding to things in the same way the entire time. Then we come down to the submittal of our resubmittal of our comments. We submit those. We get an email from Grant on the 25th saying that the Planning Commission, this whole thing that he's got at the top of his staff report, has extraterritorial authority and all of this stuff. That was the first time we were notified that there was a change from what we were told on November 14th. Grant reached out to us, offered to have a meeting. We had the meeting on January 29th, and we discussed it at length, and the city had changed their position. And it was discussed at length in that meeting. Now, I'm not saying that the in lieu of isn't warranted. What I'm saying is that we were told one thing, and now we're going to be burdened with doing something different because they changed their mind. And I've got all the documents here to prove that. Now, changing the position would have been warranted if they could have contacted us of any one of the 4 or 5 times prior. That didn't happen. I'm spending money as a developer. So we don't want to pay the in lieu of fee. We don't want to be burdened with it. The mistake occurred because they thought incorrectly that we were subject to the growth boundary, not the planning region. That's not my fault. They're supposed to be the content experts. When I figured it out was when Grant sends us an email and mentions an Attorney General opinion that was written in 2013. Somebody went digging for something. And the thing that really casts a shadow for us over this whole thing is the last Public Works Committee meeting that was had on January 20, I think it was the 22nd. On the agenda is the swap out of the section of road in front of this property to become a city road. We see that from our perspective, we've been told one thing. We haven't been told anything different. It looks like that y'all are trying to do something to us, and there's no explanation. And it's not like we don't email and email and email. Now, Grant, Marshall, y'all were in the meeting of the 29th. You can ask them. Our position is that we shouldn't have to pay for the in lieu of fee.
Anything else, Mr. Lucky?
No.
Okay. Number 7 on the planning comments, this stream notated requires a 60-foot no-build buffer. Where are you at on that one?
Oh, that was a no, and I apologize. The reason it's a no, we have the 60-foot no-build buffer in the middle. They wanted us to strike a line across there so that all the houses could be the exact same distance off Saundersville Road. Frankly, the lots are so deep, you won't be able to tell the difference between, and we're going to have 2 houses behind the creek and and the rest of the houses should be in front of the creek because it runs on an angle.
Yeah.
I can build the houses and make them look good. I don't agree with them telling me arbitrarily where to put them on a plat. So we'll put the stream buffer in, fine, not where they want us to put an arbitrary line on the plat.
Okay. Okay, we have, I see Ms. Petrelli in the queue. Ms. Petrelli, you have any, are you seeking recognition?
Yes, I have a clarification to your comments that
Okay.
you mentioned, Mr. Lucky. I want to be clear on this. Did you say that we should just go ahead and vote on number 2 for the side yard variances? Because if we don't, essentially BZA is going to do it anyway. Therefore, we should just do those side yard variances in lieu of trimming it back to 6 lots?
I'm not asking for 6 lots. I'm not in here doing a rezoning. It's a subdivision by right, so I can get the 7 lots because they're each 1 acre. So all I'm saying is I agree to the city's subdivision regs setbacks. If y'all want to modify those, then that's great. I don't have to go to the BZA. If you don't want to modify them, I'll just go to the BZA.
I was just trying to understand your tone with that, because I know you've come to Public Works before very upset, and I'm going to be honest with you. All of this discussion about emails going back and forth, I feel like I'm a fly on the wall to some underlying drama that's going on with this project, and not being totally understanding what all of this back and forth is concerns me and makes me take pause that, hey, maybe we should step back, you get everything worked out on your end, get it all cleared out, and then maybe come back and present a whole package. But going down a la carte is confusing to me.
I'm sorry it's confusing. We were forced into that. We responded as we were supposed to. It's not uncommon for applicants to have to explain certain points going across an approval by staff. I mean, I've listed very specific things that I'm
Sure.
in disagreement with, and there's reasons, valid reasons, why.
I understand that.
And the way the comments are written are vague in some sense of it. I mean, putting on there, well, it's, maybe it should be 6, maybe it should be 7. He can do the setbacks. He cannot do the setbacks. There is a frustration on my part. I've been coming up here for 30 years.
Sure.
And I have never been as frustrated in dealing with the city and the process as I have in the entire 30 years I've been doing this.
Okay, and just so that I'm clear, because as you know, I'm dual of being an alderman, your
Yes, ma'am.
frustration is exactly where, in which departments?
It is in the communication that I'm having with the departments that I have to deal with on a daily basis.
I understand.
To develop
Name the departments.
Public Works and now planning,
What is the in lieu of figure?
$90,000.
And your issue with paying that is because there was some back and forth about whether you were obligated to the improvements or not?
We were told clearly in the first meeting that we weren't subject to the city subdivision regulations or the stormwater. We walked away from that meeting spending money on the project, getting it ready to develop, and 70 days later, we were told something different.
Okay, Ms. Petrelli, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
I would like to, if I can, just break in a few moments and I'm going to recognize Mr. Free. He is the director of the planning department. I think he's going to speak, and Mr. Lucky is correct on one point. Yes, there has been precedent where we have gone through and dealt with line by line items on different plats and different staff comments, and so that's neither foreign. But I just, at this point, just as the chair speaking, what we're being asked to do tonight is really adjudicate
That's right.
what is going on staff level and the developer level, and on our side, frankly, we're going to hold that, number one, it is in the planning region, whether it's back and forth. It is in the planning region. I know it. I'm in the same boat.
I know it. I know it now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm in the planning region too, where our business is. So we know that, and we are bound. Every particular comment that they have made is consistent with subdivision regulations, and there might be disagreements, and you certainly do have the right to go to BZA if that is your choice. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that they will or will not do it. But the fact of the matter is we're probably going to say that, I don't want to spend a lot of time here adjudicating the back and forth when I think that there just needs to be a coming together and figure out what's going to work and then come back to this body for us to deal with it. And with that, I'll come back to you in a minute because I want you to respond. But I also want to hear from Mr. Free.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. This was kind of surprising from the staff standpoint as well. I wasn't in the meeting with Grant and Marshall and the developers on that second meeting, but I was there on the initial meeting. And my recollection of that initial meeting was everything was going fairly well, but then, as I recalled, engineering did bring up the issue about a payment in lieu. And at that time, the developer did assert that we did not have the authority to do that, but there was nothing where I saw the city acquiescing that, yes, you're correct, that's right. It was, no, you're still good, you're still going to have to do that. And then the response, I think that nothing had changed, so there's nothing in any email that says, oh, okay, now we're going to switch directions and things have changed. The email that he's referring to that Mr. Green sent was not at the time when we typically would send something out. It was done well in advance because these lots still didn't meet the setbacks, and they were just saying, they didn't fix it, and so he was letting them know in advance. And additionally, because of that first meeting, and we knew the developer was already asserting we did not have the authority to request the right-of-way and request the payment in lieu, therefore, he provided that information to further support that. From that first meeting. I don't know exactly, Mr. Green and Marshall Boyd were in that second meeting, and they could attest to that, but that's from the first meeting, and that's why it's kind of surprised me, and, the developer has a bold stance on this, as far as what they understand, but it's in conflict, at least for the first meeting that I was in, because I knew when this subject came up, that's why I recall it, is because it was a contentious subject because the developer felt very strongly and that, no, you can't require that. That's beyond your authority to do so because it's not in the city limits. So that's just that's what I recall in regards to that. As far as I just felt like I needed to address that from the confusion standpoint. It doesn't mean there wasn't other confusion that occurred, but going back to that, that's what I recall.
Okay, yeah, and I would just say, once again, at the end of the day, we don't have the email thread in front of us, so there's nothing we can do about that. I'm not doubting Mr. Lucky, I'm not doubting our staff, we just don't have all that stuff in front of us. Our job is to deal with what the subdivision regulations are, what the codes say, and to deal with that, and to look at the subdivision as a whole. And right now, it looks like that the comments that have been tendered with regard to the subdivision are well within the regulations of the subdivision, and there is some differences that need to be worked out. And I think that there just is one commissioner, but I'm just not so sure because there's this back and forth, and because I don't think that we are going to be able to arbitrate this to the satisfaction of both parties here. I'm inclined to say it might not be a bad idea, Mr. Lucky, for us to work this out and come back. Or if you want us to go forward with this, well, then I'm sure a motion will be made whether to approve or deny, and we'll go from there. So that's where I'm at on it. No disrespect to you. You've done a lot for the city, and you have been a developer for many years. But we're simply being asked here to arbitrate a email thread and a back and forth that we don't have all that information in front of us. What we have here is what your plat says, what your plat says, and what you're looking at, and what the staff comments are, consistent of subdivision regulations. And that's what we're going to vote on tonight. And so I guess I would ask you, sir, do you want us to go ahead and vote on this, or would you like to pull back, as Ms. Petrelli suggests, and bring this back at another time?
I've got a couple of comments I'd like to make. It's not a yes or no question. Y'all's job is to work out differences.
Mr. Lucky, please don't tell us what our job is. We know what our job is. Our job is to do what we do.
Would you
and have been doing.
Would you like to hear the recording?
I don't want to hear any recording. I'm going to go off what's written here right now.
Then we'll take a deferral.
Thank you, sir. All right. Applicant requests a deferral. So that's what we're going to do. I think this is the smart move. Move on to, well, hold on a second. We're going to go ahead and we do need to cast a vote for this. The applicant requests a deferral since this is on the agenda, and just to make sure, I'm not sure parliamentary-wise we would have to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. Request a deferral. Do we have a motion to grant the deferral?
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Lee makes the motion. Do we have a second? Second from Mr. Altizer. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. No. And Ms. Ashley votes no. Any more no's? Okay. It was everybody aye except for Ms. Ashley. Thank you, Mr. Lucky. We'll work this out. All right, the next thing we're going to go to is a rezoning request. Mr. Lee.
Just make a comment here. I think it's very unfortunate that we are where we are, and that we have had this misunderstanding with this developer who certainly has done a great deal of work in this area. I agree with you that I could not do anything other than to enforce the standards that are in place, and would do that. Yet at the same time, it does disturb me that there is such there has been an apparent lack of communication or effective communication that everyone agrees to. And I want to challenge our department staff to take the extra effort to make sure that we do not have this sort of confusion in the future, and that developers can have some confidence in what is said and agreed upon in a timely manner so that they can react in a timely manner.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, and I totally concur. And once again, you know, Mr. Lucky is a fine man and has done a great job for our city, and I believe that. I really do. And I'm just hopeful that we can get all this worked out and come back with a solution that is good for everybody, and good for you, and good for the city, and I hope that'll work. So thank you very much, Mr. Lucky. Ms. Ashley.
I just wanted to add to Mr. Lee's statements and yours that if Mr. Lucky does in fact have these emails, I personally would like to see them. And if there are notes from the staff meetings that the staff made or that were made, or clearly this gentleman believes he went down a path, and I don't think he would have done that after all these years if he did not truly believe that what he was told. I'm not saying there was a miscommunication, but he said he had a recording of a meeting, so clearly that could be put it in writing so that we can read it, a transcript, and then his notes, the emails. If he's got that, then I do think we have a serious problem here, and I think we have to consider his position. And to me, $90,000 is a whole lot of money, and that's a whole lot of money to have a misunderstanding about. And there were a couple other points on here that I think we could have addressed. That just kind of got swept away that I think we probably could have addressed tonight. I think that staff can address with Mr. Lucky, but I definitely think that he has been a part of this community for a long time. He's done a lot of really upper-end developments and high quality, and really generally does everything we ask him to do. Other than a thing here or there, I don't know of anything that he's not been able to work out. So I'm likewise, Mr. Lee, very disappointed that we've gotten to this point with him, and I hope that we can, with the transcripts and the notes, that we can try to come together and work out what's fair for him and for the city.
Thank you, Ms. Ashley, and once again, as Chairman, I echo that, and I don't take it lightly that we did this tonight, but I did not see any other feasible way that we could really be fair to Mr. Lucky and be fair to staff than for us to, if we're going to have to adjudicate this, and I use that word loosely, but if we're going to have to look at email threads and that kind of thing, I would just like to have it in front of me, and I'd like to know what we're dealing with here. And we'll get with our staff, the planning staff, and we'll come to some resolution. Thank you, Mr. Lucky. Appreciate the Planning Commissioner's comments on this, and once again, it's a hard thing, but I think in the end, we did the right thing for tonight. Staff reviewed projects. We have no rezoning requests. Staff reviewed projects that are approved: Wendy's exteriors renovation, Mid-South Rentals, and then staff reviewed projects pending: Arby's Restaurant, Fountain Brook Phase 2, Final Development Plan Amendment, Indian Lake Leasing Office, Quail Hollow Site Plan, Michael Archibald Property Final Plat, and Norman Creek Phase 1A Final Plat. Those are all staff approved. No Planning Commission action needs to be taken. You just need to be aware. Under other, we have two resolutions tonight. You have the Meadowbrook Indian Lake Phase 5 street acceptance. I believe you have that in front of you. I will suspend with the reading if that's okay. And do we have a motion to accept?
So moved.
So moved by Ms. McCormick. Any second? Second by Ms. Ashley. Are there any discussions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And everybody voted yes. And then the second resolution is Glenbrook North, Phase 3, Section 8, Andrews Run Extension Street Acceptance. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Ms. Stringfellow, second by Ms. McCormick. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are clear on that. Planning Director comments, Mr. Free.
No comments this month. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you, Mr. Free. And with that, our person here that always makes this motion, so I'm going to defer to Mr. Lee. Do you have a motion for us? We got to move. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we are adjourned.